Welcome to Invisible Me, a podcast centred around invisible health issues and the feeling of not being seen and heard. Yet here I am, standing right in front of you. Does this sound familiar? Well, come join the conversation. Share your experiences. Let's break down those norms and attitudes for the better. This is a safe space to chat with me, Pat. Welcome, Abi. Thank you for coming. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you, Pat. It's so lovely to see you.
Brilliant. I want to say sunny Manchester. Am I right? Is that the area?
Never.
Or you don't? Why do I assume you live in Manchester?
It is in Manchester. I don't think sunny is ever a word that's put with Manchester. It's grey, it's drizzly, it's cold, but it is Manchester.
But we have a sunny disposition and we're great people from the north. So
Agreed.
That makes up for it. Well, thank you for approaching me and coming forward to talk about your story and to share to our lovely listeners. Can I ask, could you give us a little picture of where you were, what you were doing, and how you came about to be in the situation where you got a diagnosis later? So we'll go along the little journey of your story. So I know you were working.
Yes. So, and this is something I was just speaking to my partner before I came on. I have never, other than people who were very close to me at the time, I have never spoken about this. It's not something, and I don't mind talking about it, it's just not something I ever bring up because more often than not, it makes other people feel quite uncomfortable. But yeah, so back in 2017, so I've lived in Manchester for 10 years now. I came up here for uni.
Okay.
So I came up here in 2014. I was at Salford Uni. Throughout my time at uni, I had different odd jobs, as you do. One of those jobs, and when I was in third year, I had a contract with the Manchester Arena. So I worked on the merchandise stands.
Cool.
So yeah, just selling T-shirts, programs.
We've probably crossed paths before.
Definitely. There are so
you
many
might have
people.
sold me a Tina Turner T-shirt.
There are so many people that were at concert. I'm like, I've definitely sold you a T-shirt in the past, I know. And it was great because we used to go in and watch the acts, like you're not really meant to, but me and my friend who worked really closely together, we'd like sneak in during our breaks and watch some of the acts.
There has to be perks. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so I'd worked there from like 2016. I'd worked there for about a year and a half or so. And yeah, so it was coming to the end of my time at uni. Actually, I'd actually finished, so all my coursework had been handed in, and I was staying in Manchester. So my family are back in Norfolk.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed up in Manchester and had decided I was going to stay for like an extra 6 weeks to just work because there were loads of shows.
Sure.
Lots of shows, and the big ones is that they'll take that were there and take that to about 15 shows when they're in Manchester.
Yes.
So there were lots and lots of shows coming up, and I was like, oh, look, before I head back to Norfolk for the summer and kind of work out what I'm doing after uni and looking for jobs in what I wanted to be doing in sports media, I was like, right, I'll just earn as much as I can in that time while I've still got my uni accommodation.
Sure.
So I'd finished uni and carrying on working, and Ariana Grande was on at the Arena. It was one of the shows I'd signed up for. Me and my friend worked on the same stand pretty much every night. It was one of those things where if there was a job that you could make it a 2-person job, we always did.
Yeah.
So we were kind of like glued at the hip. And yeah, it was just like normal night as always. And the thing is, it's so funny because there's so many elements of that night that I remember so vividly that like normally you obviously kind of push the back of your mind, but it is so kind of prevalent now. Come 10:30, the concert was just finished. And it's really strange because our stand, so we were called stall 1.
Mm-hmm.
So we were right next to the doors of the city room, which is where it happened.
Right.
And there's a stall so when on really, really busy shows, they had an extra stall in the city room. And I'd just gone and delivered the final like boxes of T-shirts to the city room. And then I was like, God, it's so busy out there. I said, there's loads of people waiting for, like, there's loads of parents waiting.
Yes.
And it was just a comment that any other night, it just wouldn't have meant anything. But I was like, God, it's really busy in there. Like I was weaving in and out of people.
But it stood out all Because of the age group,
Yeah.
it stood out. All the mums and dads were there to collect
Yeah.
the teens.
Yeah. So, and usually it's usually quite quiet in there. So I was like, God, it's really busy in there, you know. Anyway, came back in, I'm clipping on my money belt. People are starting to come out. And then it happens. And it's like nothing I can ever like I still now cannot explain because I can't relate it to anything else.
Mhm.
Just even the sound, the light, the smell, everything about it is like nothing I've ever experienced, because you can't compare it to a bonfire, you can't compare it to fuse, but anything like that. It was just
No.
that it just happened, and it was obviously awful and chaos, like absolutely ensued. My supervisor was putting the like went into a like emergency mode, putting the shutters down. You had
Sure.
people diving over into our stand to try and take cover. And we just kind of went into the back room. My friend was then quite panicked because her sister also worked there and worked on the other side of the doors. But we had no idea what had actually happened at that moment. It wasn't. I knew it was bad, and obviously from what I could see, I knew it was really bad, but I didn't know what it was at that point.
No.
Like in my mind, I was really convinced that there was going to be like a shooter
Yes.
or somebody there
Yes.
shooting. So like that's then going through your mind. And it would just, yeah, from there, I mean, it felt like hours and hours, but it probably wasn't that long in the grand scheme of things.
Mhm.
We were then evacuated, but we were then being told to go different places because of staff. They had like evacuation areas. So kind of like running about, sprinting about, but then you're obviously seeing everything that you're seeing. But it's just it was just I just can't explain the what was even going through my mind. And we came down the steps of the arena, got sent to one place. Then there was like rumors and bits. It's like, oh no, we can go back in. Which like now, I'm like, of course we couldn't go back in. But
Why?
we all started
Yes.
to like. But then we got sent to another evacuation point, and then but all of my things were inside the arena. Everything, my phone, purse, everything.
Mhm.
And I remember my first one, and I was like, and they were like, oh, you no, you can't go back in. And I was like, but my purse is in there, and I was like, it's got my train tickets in there, and I'm going to York tomorrow with my friend to go to Betty's tea room. So I need to go. And like, that was my first thought. That's how, like, where my mind went,
Of
because
course.
I was in shock.
Mhm.
So to me, I'm like, well, I need my train ticket. And that time you could only have like print out tickets. So I was like, I need my printed tickets to go to Betty's tea room tomorrow. And I'm thinking, obviously, in the grand scheme thing, I didn't go to Betty's anyway because I
No.
really wasn't very well after that. But
Of course.
it was like that was my panic at the time because I was so kind of distanced from what I'd actually seen and what had happened. And I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't call anyone. I couldn't ring anyone to tell them what had happened. I couldn't ring anyone to tell them I was okay. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, friends and family are going to start seeing this on the news. Obviously, it was late at night as well.
Yes.
So I'm like, are they going to wake up in the night and see this and not be able to get hold of me and then panic? And then they said, oh, you can go home. And I was like, but I can't get home because my keys, my phone, purse, I couldn't get a bus, I couldn't get a taxi. I know on that night there were taxis giving people lifts for free, but
Sure.
at that point I was like, I'm gonna have to walk through Salford on my own at like midnight
Traumatized.
with traumatized
Yes.
with nothing on me. I haven't
Yeah.
got anything. Um, and then even as small things like getting to my accommodation, you have to have a buzzer. So I was like, I'm not even going to be able to get into the reception to tell them what's happened.
Sure.
So many of those like little things that was just like, oh my God, like what do I do? My mind is just completely like all over the place. It just felt like mush.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just couldn't process what had happened. I was saying I couldn't even get home. And our friend's mum gave all of us a lift home.
Oh.
All of us. She literally did the rounds and gave everyone a lift. But then once I got outside, I couldn't even then get in. And so even to that point, I was just completely in shock. And once I got into my uni accommodation, I had people like, oh yeah, apparently, because I was like, a bomb has gone off
Mm.
in the arena. People are really hurt. And they're like, no, apparently it was a speaker that blew. It wasn't that. And I was like, I literally have seen,
I've walked away from it.
I've walked like it was not a speaker. But then you have people like, oh no, it's just like rumored. And then I remember I didn't realize the kind of magnitude of it
Yeah.
at that point, of how big it was around the world. And then people were like, oh, so and so's tweeting about it. This person's just tweeted well wish. And I was like, oh my, how do they even know that it's happened here? Like, because it was still, again, the processing and not kind of really realizing how bad it was, even though I had lived it, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
When can I ask when before you actually got home and your brain was just being logical
Yeah.
by saying, "Oh, hold on a
Yeah.
minute, I need my keys, I need my train ticket, I
Yeah.
need my phone, I can't get home."
Yeah.
Just being logical and quite calm, considering it's incredible how our brains rescue us in a way in trauma. So you were going through that. At what point did somebody say? Did anybody actually say to you, "A bomb's gone off in the arena," or did you just figure it out, or did you realize till you got home? When did it dawn on you? This is not
Yeah.
a shooting, a stabbing, or whatever. This is an actual bomb, and or did you? Can you remember?
Yeah. Yeah. There's certain bits that are really, really clear in my mind, and other bits I'm so hazy about. But I can remember, so my manager, or all of our manager for the merchandising,
Hmm.
was injured, but had got us all out.
Okay.
And then I remember, like, my manager was injured, and it was at that moment that it was like, oh gosh, like, people we know
Yeah.
are injured, but luckily, like, okay, and like made a recovery. But that was like the first moment I was like, oh my gosh, like, wow, okay. And it wasn't. I rang my mum because I knew the only numbers I knew off by heart were my dad's mobile number and my mum's home number.
Hmm.
So I remember borrowing someone's phone and I rang my mum. Um, but I can't remember what I said to her, but then my mum remembers it very vividly because
Ah,
she said that I rang her saying, a bomb's gone off, I'm okay. It took ages for people to come, but I'm out, and all this kind of stuff. I was like, I don't remember saying any of that. But I think it was just,
I know.
I've got to let people know
Yep.
that need to know. And yeah, and I think it was only once I was properly back. And that night, obviously, when I didn't sleep for a very long time.
Hmm.
But it was that night when I was awake and my partner at the time was, like, he'd just fallen asleep, and it kind of all just hit me.
Hit you
Then I
for
was like,
sure.
it was okay, right. I don't feel very good.
Yeah.
But I'm really lucky that, well, obviously, like, I was absolutely fine, but I'm really lucky of the people that I worked with, I was really close with, and still very, very close with,
Yes.
because they understand exactly how I'm feeling.
Nobody will understand it. Only the people that shared the same experience. Simple as that.
Exactly.
And the ironic whole message is you were saying, I'm lucky. And we'll go, me listening, going, no, you weren't lucky because you were there and this happened to you.
Yeah.
But you were lucky you were uninjured, lucky you're alive. So we say we're lucky, but
Yeah.
am I right in saying it's still with you to this day and it's never left?
Yeah. That's exactly it. And I think, and I kind of, I mean, in those situations, you make jokes me because it kind of makes you feel better. But people usually say you're more likely to win the lottery than be in a terrorist attack, like
Sure.
the odds.
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, where's my lottery win then?
Yes.
Because, and that's why. So when people, and that's part of kind of how it's carried through, and it still sits with me now. Is I catastrophize everything. So I always think the worst thing is going to happen, even with the smallest thing. But if someone tries to say, like, "Oh, what's the worst that can happen?" I was like, "No, because the worst that could happen actually is, like, actually happen, something that you never ever you see on the TV, you hear about, but you never ever think it is gonna happen in a close proximity to you." So then that's what I really struggle with now, because I constantly have that in the back of my mind that, well, it did happen and it was awful, and I still think about it. So what's to say that this wouldn't happen to me tomorrow on this level? Um,
Did you, were you offered by the staff or the management later support, counselling, medical help, or did you seek it yourself? What was for you? What was there to help you later?
Yeah, so there was a couple of things they did offer. I went back down to Norfolk, and I chose to go back down to Norfolk rather than stay in Manchester.
For sure.
Um, but they did offer obviously help, and the people who were like directly affected, so in the room, and they had a lot of help, and on like different levels. But I mean, luckily, like I say, I was really, really close with the team
Yes.
that I was actually on a store with. So we used to meet up a lot and
Good.
talk about things. But I got support myself, but actually when I got my next job at Man City, they had health insurance. And as part of that health insurance, they had counselling as part of that. So I took that upon, because also it wasn't like trauma specific, but it was counseling that they offered, so I could have it over the phone. It felt very relaxed, and it didn't feel like I'm going to go and talk about this awful trauma that's
Yeah.
happened, but it just felt like it was distance enough that it was helpful for me, but wasn't connected directly with
I know
that.
what you mean.
Yeah,
You could still seek counselling, not for the actual issue or guidance.
yeah,
They just give you little tools and little tips and tricks to
yeah,
do daily or to help you in the moment.
yeah,
And you were heard, and you were heard by a person not connected to it.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
and helps. It helps a little bit.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned before. I think the reason I decided to do it when I was at City is I needed it because I really struggled, understandably, as most people would after, but I really struggled being in large stadiums, crowded places,
Mm.
places where there's lots of people, places where there's security and bag checks, all things like that, which ordinarily I wanted to be as far away from as possible, but equally I wanted to work in football where I was covering football matches with crowds of thousands of people. So I'm like, I need to work on this, or I need to at least address this before it becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And just to kind of acknowledge that I'm not crazy for feeling like this. It's because of my experience where something has happened that
Yeah.
you then transfer it, don't you, into other situations.
Two things I want to say. First one, how resilient and how superbly strong you are. You may not think it or feel it, but to remove yourself from that and then put yourself in to the career of choice that you stayed loyal to, you wanted to do this,
Mm,
you accomplished that, and putting yourself into almost another arena,
mm,
because it's very similar in looks and aesthetics and everything, the crowds, the undergrounds, the round the arena. It is a similar building. And you did it. You sought support. You rationalized. You put in preventions for yourself. I think that's so commendable. You're an amazing woman, honestly. Well done, you.
thank you, Kat. I
It's not
actually,
easy.
weird you saying that, because I actually, until I'd kind of thought about it before our chat
Mm.
coming here, I actually went back to work at the arena when it reopened.
Wow, I was going to ask you to go back to a show, but you went back to work.
Yeah,
Well,
I went back, but I felt like I needed to. But
sure.
my friends that I worked with
Mm.
carried on working at the arena. And when
Wow.
they had the One Love concert and everything, because again, I was back down in Norfolk, and they worked that and went to that. And I felt almost bad that I wasn't doing that.
Mm.
It's like, oh, I've just put the distance in between it, but I'm watching everyone all together. So when I came back to City, I still, and I not a lot, but I did the odd shift just to get back there. And because the thing is, it's one of those things I thought, if I don't go back now, I'm going to build this up in my mind of not wanting to
You see,
go there.
that's the bit I'm talking about. You somehow have this inner strength and you're self-solving, self-healing, and that's great. And not all of us have that. You have it. Mightn't feel like it to yourself, but you're doing it, and it feels like you did right. You faced the demon. You went back, because you can't. We all need closure, no matter what level of closure. But we all need some sort of. Has to be tangible. It has to be kind of like real, and
Mm,
by being physically in the building doing the shifts,
yeah,
it helps with the healing.
yeah,
It won't fix it, but it kind of helps you get another layer of resilience for future going forward in life.
It's so true.
Oh, well done.
Oh, thank you.
Did a GP or a professional actually diagnose you with the common title that we all hear of, PTSD? Was that given, put on you, or was that ever brought up?
No, and it was brought up with my a counselor. I don't know whether you call them counselors or therapists. I don't know if that's like the nicest term to
We'll have both.
use them, but people have both. But I never actually went to the GP to be officially diagnosed on paper, because at that point I felt like I had the support there,
Yes.
and that's kind of where. And I spoke to my partner about before I came on this, because I said, "Oh, I'm really worried actually that if I come on here and people are going to think I've kind of labeled myself this, or I'm being dramatic, or I'm thinking," and I was like, no, actually, because PTSD comes in so many different forms,
Yes.
in that it's not, and there are times where I genuinely, like, obviously I can close my eyes and I can see it, I can, like, there are those things, but I think when people think of PTSD, they think of maybe more like war and kind of where they might have seen it on films or in TV shows, whereas
Yes.
there's so many things where it can affect my day to day. And I might go weeks and not have an issue, but then there might be one thing or one trigger which will really bother me for a while, and it takes me time to move past it. So I was like, oh, I don't know if I can even call it like officially PTSD, because a counselor kind of mentioned it to me and we kind of worked through what my triggers were and what my coping mechanism. But I'm like, well, it kind of is, and I suppose it's different for everyone. And it's like saying to somebody who maybe has anxiety, like, oh, well, unless the doctor said it, you're not anxious, you don't have anxiety. Whereas, like, I would never say that to somebody like that. So I'm like, oh, well, I suppose it's kind of with these kind of situations, maybe it's not like the official labels, but kind of what forms it comes in, I guess.
We're just a nation that likes to put a label on everything
Yeah.
to help the rest of us
Yeah.
deal with what's in front of us.
Yeah.
It's not the actual person suffering. We'll go, oh yes, it's PTSD, and then we can accept that and move on. But it manifests in many different ways, and the smallest things for no reason. You could be getting on the train, crowded train, and it's there. Or
Yeah.
you could be just sitting in a restaurant, not that crowded, but something else. So it manifests in so many little small ways. It's definitely trauma. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And PTSD is what we, the rest of us, will use to help us figure out what it is that's affected you or somebody that might be suffering trauma.
It's interesting, when talking about kind of triggers and what affects me, that I kind of picked, when you gave me the dates of when to do this, and obviously we don't want to date it too much. But the reason I picked this date is because bonfire night is a really tricky night for me.
Yes, it is.
Really tricky night. I don't like fireworks, obviously, understandably.
Sure.
Hate them. My dog's ironic. So me and my dog's basically like hide under a blanket all the time. But again, because I have friends that are so close, we used to get together on bonfire nights, or we'd check in on each other, just like checking, you're okay today, and things like that. Because
good,
like, today is difficult, but also because it's so many years on now. In the first year or first 2 years, you have people check in on you on days like this, or even on the anniversary, getting lots of messages and things. Obviously, as the time goes on, to other people, this is not me like moping or saying, it's not at all.
No.
But it fades for a lot of people, and it's like, oh God, is that today? Oh right, okay. Whereas obviously for me, these kind of dates, I'm like, they are rooted in my mind, and I prepare myself for. So even like this year, I maybe had like one message from certain, other than the people that I'm obviously close with. And then my nephew was born on the anniversary.
Oh.
So, and I was like, actually, this is, I'm really pleased, because today has now a different and an alternate meaning, that it's something to me. And my friend actually messaged it, and I was like, oh my gosh, my nephew's been born. And she was like, how good that you have something so special happen on such a difficult day, that now you can, although you're not going to forget it, but you can celebrate the day
Yes.
with something else
Yes.
as well. It doesn't always have a kind of dark meaning. So that's really, yeah, really lovely.
I think that's just a lovely, happy coincidence. It was on that day. New life, new hope, new beginnings on a horrendous anniversary.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's a nice balance. So special boy. That's brilliant. You said you prepare yourself. You help yourself cope for anniversaries and certain things. Is that when you make it like a duvet day, or you plan to be away, or do you make yourself busy? Just for listeners, that everybody has different little tools, but is that what you do?
And I'm quite bad because I just love being busy anyway. I'm just constantly looking for something to do.
I have noticed.
I can't
on your socials. Yes.
I literally can't sit and do nothing. I'm constantly even if it's like I'm having a relaxing day, but I'll end up like painting mugs and things like that. But I do always make time, and particularly like on the anniversary, I'll give myself actually a bit of time to just think and let myself think about it, because anytime it used to pop into my head, it was like, no, I need to think about something else, I need to get it out of my mind. Whereas now it's like, and obviously, and like now I can have this conversation, I'm talking to you about it, and I'm not in tears, and I can have the conversation. But a few years ago, literally the mention of it, and I'm like, throat's going funny, eyes are welling up, I wouldn't be able to talk about it. So it's just letting myself sit with my feelings and actually acknowledge the feelings rather than try and just bury them. But I do always keep busy, but that's because that's normal to me. So keeping busy, but carving out a bit of time to let myself acknowledge how I'm feeling, my emotions, and also if I need to take a step back, then that's kind of where I find it in those moments. But yeah, it's just also the accepting it, because I think so often at the beginning I purposely never spoke about it or brought it up. Whereas now it doesn't really come up because it very, very rarely comes up in conversation. But it's like letting myself allowed to talk about
Be.
just to be. That's so true. Yeah.
Thank you. I thank you for for sharing your trauma. And others will relate to some of the things you've said, but we all handle things as human beings very individually. But generally, the things you've said, like facing it head on at a later date, facing that demon, getting that bit of closure, having the close network, having the support, and eventually talking about it easily, talking about it now publicly. But you're very forward thinking. Like I said earlier, you're so strong, and the resilience within you is phenomenal.
Thank you, Pat.
And I don't think your story's over. I think you're going to do something more and something wonderful with this story. Maybe a book. I think you will be helping other people because you are an inspiration. And yes, it is lucky. We're all very lucky because we have wonderful Abi in the world. So thank you for coming. Thank you for joining me. It's been lovely talking to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it so much. And like I say, I've never actually spoken to any, like not even family, have I sat down and properly spoken about in detail this kind of stuff. But
I feel honoured, and thank you. I really appreciate you opening up and trusting me.
And thank you for creating such a wonderful, safe space. I think after listening to your other podcast episodes, the fact that you are so wonderful and understanding, and you create a really lovely safe space. So
thank you. For those that can't see my face, I'm blushing. So thank you. And folks can find you on your socials and all the good work you're doing in your business, because you're also a business owner now.
I am. So yeah, I moved away from cities and I now have my own business, which is Tailor-Made Social. So if you want to find out a few tips and tricks of how to jazz up your socials, or you need any help with anything, then please drop me a DM. Be happy to help.
Reach out to Abi. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you so much.
We will talk again soon.
Absolutely.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Pat.